One of the oldest riddles in cosmology is where and what is the edge of the universe, and this has led to the modern physicalist slash materialist battle cry of the containment principle. The physical universe contains everything that is physical and nothing else. But the problem is the physical universe cannot explain its own existence. We end up with an Einsteinian block universe, a totally arbitrary and deterministic manifold which can't allow for its own creation or sustenance. The principle is said to prove that for the purposes of physical science, we can totally ignore our conscious experience, perception, our souls, the richness of our inner mental world, the startling fact that we within the universe are aware of our existence, the fact of anything organizing into complex systems at all that seems to be teleological, the seeming fine-tuning for life and consciousness. All these things are just brushed aside by physicalist science because they can't be explained physically but must be explained metaphysically. So it's totally clear that the physicalist containment principle is inadequate. Science tries to escape this by saying that all of consciousness and perception, etc., are no more than just the biochemistry and neurons in the brain, but this is absurd on its face. It reveals more about the scientists than about the true nature of mental existence. To circumvent this problem, we need a model of the universe, what Edward Harrison calls the spiritual, psychical, physical universe, which surpasses the current physicalist model of the hard sciences, which and also incorporates the insights and extraordinary success of the current model universe of academic scientists. Fortunately, this has already been done for us by Chris Langan, who in the 1980s formulated the cognitive theoretic model of the universe, or CTMU, the namesake of this channel, which he says provides the very long-sought bridge between mind and matter, science and spirituality, and the internal and external aspects of human and cosmic existence. Quite a tall order, yet all that really remains to be done is to disseminate and explore the implications of this theory as it relates to the cosmic edge. So that's what we'll be doing in this video. But first, let's go into the history of the cosmic edge problem, because this is a very interesting history. The debate of whether we live in an infinite and therefore edgeless universe has raged since ancient Greek times, with the atomists and the Epicureans taking the former view that we live in an infinite edgeless universe, and the Stoics and Aristotelians believed that we live in a finite and therefore bounded universe. And the cosmic edge, the absurdity of this, was illustrated by a famous paradox posed to Plato by Aristarchus. He says, what happens to a spear when it is hurled across the outer boundary of the universe? And it reveals how absurd it is to have this picture of a physical edge to the universe. While Aristarchus debunked the cosmic edge in the ancient world, the notion has been given, and this is actually why the Stoics ended up believing in an infinite universe, but the notion has been given new force by modern physicalist cosmology, which through the notion of a steady state expanding universe. And the view that the universe is objectively expanding implies a background against which it is set, which is losing space to the universe over time at an accelerating rate. But because there is no such background, what seems like outer expansion from the perspective of us observers inside the universe would appear to the universe itself to be the material contraction of its contents. We are getting smaller relative to the universe. But neither of these are true. Neither of these perspectives can be objectively determined because it's just semantic word games without that fixed background against it. So, without the background against which to compare it, we're forced to say that what appears to be expansion in physicalist cosmology is really rescaling. And this is the first key insight of the CTMU, that material contraction qua spatial expansion is generalized to conspansion, which is a portmanteau of that phrase, the recursion between the global and local aspects of the universe, which you could say one's expanding and one's contracting, but it doesn't really matter. The recursion between them allows for the universe, the real universe, to evolve over time, and it's accelerating in its evolution at the speed of c, which is the speed of light, but it's also the speed of information, how fast anything can travel, and this is set by the conspansive manifold. So the CTMU generalizes the physicalist containment principle. The physical universe contains all and only that which is physical, to what Langan calls the reality principle in his 2002 paper. Reality, i.e. the real universe, contains all and only that which is real, Langan says. And this principle, which is a generalization of the physical containment principle, forces us to reckon with a number of non-physical things about reality which would otherwise have escaped our notice, namely design, biocentrism, which is the view that life is somehow central to the universe, the self-excited circuit. Oh, bless you. The self-excited circuit, self-boundary, and the essential role of perception and cognition in the dynamics of the universe. I'm going to quote myself that Langen's metaphysical ontology principle, which is a generalization of the necessary logical closure of the universe, draws a boundary containing all of reality. Reality cannot be defined by anything external to this boundary. For anything real enough to affect reality is included within reality itself. Reality is ontological, self-describing, and all operations and processes within reality are included within reality's description of itself. Reality is thus called a closed descriptive manifold in the CTMU by virtue of its closure. Reality must also bring itself into existence, both creating and sustaining itself, and is thus responsible for its own structure and evolution. So the classical fine-tuning problem, so reality is able to actually communicate with itself about how it wants to set prior constraints in order for the evolution of the universe. So the classical fine-tuning problem, why is our universe so favorable in numerous ways to the existence of life, is actually not a problem at all. Life is not fine-tuned to the conditions of the universe, as the Darwinists believe, but the universe is fine-tuned to the conditions of life. This is why Chris Langen says, sure, life originated biologically, but it also originated metaphysically, okay? It comes from the origin. It's part of the structure of the universe. It was inevitable to say that, well, there could have been a universe with no life, where life just never got started, never formed. That's hogwash, okay? There's no reason for such a universe to exist, even for itself, right? That's an absurdity. It's a bit like the anthropic principle, but there's got to be, the anthropic principle with utility, right? Part of the reason the universe exists is because there are secondary tellers that derive utility from it. So everywhere we see evidence of extraordinary design, William Dembski in 1998 actually proved mathematically that no combination of random and deterministic processes could have developed the informational complexity we see, the specified complexity we see in biological life. There has to be meaning and purpose in teleology, or else it's just absurd to think that this could have arisen as random and non-purposeful processes. To guide the evolution of a phenomena such as biological life, which is so marvelously complex, not just humans, but even like a flower. It's just absurd. There has to be a conscious will for life to exist, or it won't exist. If you see a watch on a ground, you wouldn't think that it's been formed by random and purposeless processes. You'd think that there was an intentional and purposeful designer who created it in order to derive utility from that watch, whether he was going to sell that or use it for himself, whatever. It's quite obvious, and the universe, being infinitely more complex than a watch, requires a fine-tuning to the degree that it's irrational to believe that it's random. The purpose of reality is self-identification and self-generation, and the way it does this is through consciousness and life. These are baked into the very fabric of reality. It sets certain constants for itself and guides the evolution of galaxies and stars and planets, and even though we don't know the purpose of everything in the universe, we know that there is one. Everything furthers in some way its own self-identification. Obviously, we as human beings have free will, and we're free to kind of go against the teleology of God, but there's still a reason why we're here, which is to freely will those decisions. So consciousness and life are the result, in a sense, of a conscious and living universe, which selects certain cosmological constants, gravity, the speed of light, Planck's constant, the charge of electrons, whatever, which for some reason or another suit this goal better. Almost all possible universes, according to Edward Harrison, if you adjust these constants even slightly, contain no stars, and in those that do, most have stars that are non-luminous or so luminous that their lifetimes are too short for biological evolution. So reality is, in some ways, as a closed descriptive manifold, it is setting these constants in order to allow for the existence of life. Reality is its own boundary. The cosmic containment problem, what's the boundary of reality? Reality is the boundary of reality. It's self-bounding. It's an infinity collapsing on finitude in order to generate the appearance of a finite world. But really, finitude is a fiction this mathematical metaphysics says finitude is a fiction created within infinity, not infinity a fiction created within finitude, as most mathematicians think. So the reality is its own boundary and is constantly refining and regenerating itself. And the boundary of a boundary, so the boundary of reality's boundary of the cosmic edge is zero, not in the sense of nothingness as we usually think this, because nothingness is actually a paradoxical construct for a number of reasons, but zero informational constraint, pure self-generative freedom. It's free to generate its own structure and evolution for its own purposes. So what is the edge of the real universe? The answer to that problem, which has plagued philosophy and cosmology for several thousand years, the answer is the universe itself. And so the constants of physics, as we've seen, are intentionally adjusted to be compatible with the existence of life. And the reason scientists won't admit this rather obvious fact is that it's not used to answering functional questions, how something is, not teleologic questions, why something is. It is used to answering functional questions, not teleologic questions. But when you pursue the latter avenue of exploration, you ask why, you end up realizing that reality, by virtue of its self-containment, must actually have meaning and purpose. By virtue of its self-containment, it must be living, conscious, and personal, and have a series of directed aims and ends seeking to fulfill themselves. This is teleology par excellence, in the words of Carl Jung. It is experiencing consciousness and life. Because of our experience of reality, too, we're forced to conclude that it's experiencing, because we're within the universe, there's usually this dualism. But at the very least, through us, if we're in the universe, then the universe, the real universe, is experiencing consciousness and life and personality through the life forms it has created, and yet is then uncountably, infinitely greater than any part of its creation. So this is the Aristotelian view, that there is a purposeful, that in order to account for the teleology, for the specified complexity of the natural world, we actually are forced to conclude that there is a purposeful pattern-generating prime mover which stands behind reality. Ultimate reality is not a what, but a who. God is, a personal and sovereign entity with goals and ends seeking to fulfill themselves in private, conscious experience. And so where ontology and the study of being, and epistemology, the study of knowledge, are coupled in the CTMU as active and passive forms of knowledge and being, we actually realize that the reason for being is in fact self-knowledge. The universe contains you thinking about it, and it is thusly self-aware. The Cartesian maxim, I think therefore I am, is generalized to the axiom of the self-aware universe. The universe thinks, therefore it is. Thinking/awareness, or self-identification / self-perception, where this is all happening internal to its own identity. These processes, thinking and awareness and self-identification, self-perception, are generalized to self-generation. How the real universe selects for its own existence is through these self-identification events. And we don't know this just from Chris Lang, this is also what the great physicist John Wheeler termed the self-excited circuit. He said, a participatory universe is a self-excited circuit that implicates observers in perceptual and ontological feedback. It is the loop in which physics gives rise to observer participancy gives rise to information, and information gives rise to physics. The universe's self-awareness is generating, giving lattice to itself. It's all self-contained. The universe is its own boundary. And the very building blocks of the universe, thusly, are these acts of observer participation. Tyler Goldstein, the author of Sentient Singularity Theory, describes thusly the totality of existence as a singularity of sentience that is creating additional sentient singularities within itself. Self-awareness is the fundamental fact of the real universe's being. This pattern forms a single self-reflective knot of perception heading an assembly body. So this is a meta-cybernetic view. So this self-reflective knot of perception heading an assembly body that integrates multiple entangled strings of information. So the complex specified information you see from all these acts of observer participation in biological life is a result of the cosmic edge determined by the cause-expansive manifold, which is the structure describing how the universe evolves over time, merging being and becoming, or self-subsistence and self-identification. And the universe, we know that from our own personal experience, children realize this, includes psychic things such as consciousness and self-awareness, obviously. This is the fundamental fact of our existence, more than matter, more than space or time or direction or quantity. It's consciousness and self-awareness and perception. So the physicalist model of the universe just brushes these aside, totally neglects them, or reduces them to purely physical phenomena. And the reason for this is because of the containment riddle. Where in the many models of the universe can the can be found the cosmologists conceiving and studying those universes. Cosmologists always have a certain dualism between them and the universe that they study, but this is just illusory. It has to include themselves. It has to include the theorist, include the observer. To address the infinite regress of modeling the modeler in a universe, cosmology, because then you have to model the modeler modeling the model, and so on and so forth. To address this infinite regress, cosmologists tend to totally neglect themselves and try to view the universe from an objective perspective, totally removing their own mental dynamics. But this is absurd, because this is where the theory is coming from. So until we have a model of the universe which includes the model, we'll never be able to explain psychic phenomena. However, we have such a model, the cognitive theoretic model of the universe, the CTMU, and we ignore it at our peril. It's like Eric Hyde says, everything emerges from a single source, a plenum, an abyss of spirit, which can be observed and understood as being the divine source of all, the light which shines forever, or white light. It's giving lattice to itself, the infinite God creating finite forms, finite structures, to freely will their own existence. Bounded only by itself, it has perfect freedom, the light which shines forever. All is light. Let the light shine forth in the darkness. May the peace of our Father in heaven be upon you. Like and subscribe. Peace.